Ha matakyapi, wambli wiyaka washdewi amachiapie, washichumie Dyani White Hawk, Lakota. Greetings, friends and relatives. I'm really grateful to be here tonight. I wanted to thank Mitra and Madeline for putting us all together in conversation with this work. It's been a joy to get to know Edna's practice, be introduced to it. It's my first time here on campus, so I'm excited to see this space and be introduced to the community as well. So just wanted to start there and say thank you. My name is Dyani White Hawk. I'm a visual artist based in Minneapolis. And I wanted to start a little bit, to give you a little bit of background, because these are super condensed presentations of our work. We were given a couple prompts on what to speak about tonight, or what they were hoping to hear about, and one of those was on what our inspiration is. We all approach our work from a place of geometric abstraction. And so, what sources do we draw from? How do we approach geometric abstraction? And so I'm providing this first slide here because I wanted to give a little bit of a visual grounding in the places that I draw inspiration from. The examples in this slide include from like top left, over like you're reading a book. Painting on buffalo hide, porcupine quillwork on moccasins, lane stitch beadwork on a children's cradle board cover, painting on parfletch, which is abstract painting on stretched rawhide, and then clothing, personal adornment, regalia making. And these are all Lakota art forms, and these practices were historically upheld by women. And the legacies that they've left for us and that are continually practiced in our communities are really the root sources of inspiration for my studio practice. I also draw from the histories of from the history of easel painting abstraction, or Western or European American abstraction. But specifically, my work focuses on where those histories intersect, where they meet, how they've influenced one another. My practice is really rooted predominantly in painting and in beadwork. Utilize motifs, symbols, and aesthetics that are rooted in Lakota visual language. This piece is titled Walk With Me. It's 42 by 72 inches, acrylic on canvas. It includes rhinestone chain as well. And then the second question, I'm going to speed through these. I'm kind of a long talker, so actually 5 to 7 minutes is one of the biggest challenges for me. I could do an hour, no sweat, but so if I feel like I'm speeding through it, it's because that's the only way I'll get through it. So the second question I was given was about scale. My works have varied over the years from really intimate, small size works to really monumental installations. And within my studio, we also maintain a jewelry and a textile line titled Sičáŋģu, which is White Hawk and Lakota. And we do this because I really think it's important that all people have a point of access to the practice. Very few people can afford to put fine art in their homes. And I do, since my work comes from and is rooted in community, I think it's really important that we have multiple points of access and that covers the spectrum of participation. And so, Mitra and Madeline had noted on my prompt, you go all the way from like jewelry to these monumental installations, and why is that? And so this particular piece is 8 feet high by 14 feet wide, and it's fully beaded. I utilize scale as a way to honor the foundational legacies of Native art and the artistic history of this continent, and to create works that are absolutely unavoidable. Native art has largely been left out or othered in the ways that art history has been taught and presented. This particular piece, this is a detail image of that piece. You can see that it's It's fully beaded. It took 18 collaborators to help me finish this work. So my work, really since this piece, has blossomed into a full studio practice with, have 11 people that work at the studio now and help me create these larger beaded pieces, and it's another part of the conversation we don't have time for. But works such as this piece, Wopila Lineage is the title of this work, as well as pieces like this, which is, this piece is from the Quiet Strength series. This one is titled She Gives Quiet Strength, and this is a 7-foot by 10-foot painting. So making a choice to make works that are large and unavoidable is intentional. These works are meant to occupy equal spaces alongside the legacies of Euro and Euro-American, often male painters. And this statement in scale is meant to open dialogue and critical thinking about the development and the evolution of abstraction within the US. You know, we have been taught and presented the history that abstraction, if you think about it, if you take a moment anytime you read something going forward, if they use the word abstraction and you are supposed to assume that they're talking about European and European American painters, take a beat and recognize the fact that that word abstraction has a much broader meaning, and abstraction is a global practice and abstraction is a human practice. So by creating works that draw from the rich history of indigenous art forms, and then making sure that they are big enough to hold space on walls next to their counterparts who have been written into histories as the supposed inventors of abstraction, I'm asking people to stop and to think critically about the development of abstraction on this continent, but also globally, and how we talk about it, how we're teaching it, how we're displaying it, how we're thinking about it. This is a detail of that work. So this piece is an acrylic painting, and it is completely populated in these vertical brushstrokes, done one by one, that are meant to pay tribute to and honor the legacies of porcupine quillwork, lane stitch beadwork, weaving, and other indigenous art forms. As I mentioned, this series is titled Quiet Strength, and it honors the legacies of Native women in particular, and their profound contributions to our artistic history. Native women traditionally upheld the abstract practices in Plains artwork. So when you see ledger work or narrative painting, those are our male practices. Well, when you see the abstract work, the beadwork, the quillwork, everything that was on that first slide and things of the sort have been historically female practices, which is also really important to keep in mind as we're talking about abstraction and the history of that, and who has in academia been lifted up and who has been looked at as a source of just inspiration. Other works combine painting and beadwork, and in these pieces the beadwork is stitched over fields of color fields or fields of stripe painting, intentionally rearranging hierarchies and notions of invention or imposed value or importance. So the reality is abstraction has been practiced on this continent long before and alongside the histories of European American painters. And so by putting beadwork on top of these foundations of easel painting abstraction, of stripe painting and color field eras, references to those eras, you meet the beadwork first. And you're thinking about the history that is embedded in beadwork, you're thinking about the history that's embedded in beads, and glass beads, which are a trade item as well. You're thinking about the history of painting, and by putting the beadwork on top, it's asking people to stop for just a beat and think about how we're presented those, and in what order, and in what value, what level of importance. This is a detail of the beadwork on canvas. And then sculptures such as this piece, which is from the Carey series, offer opportunities for us to evaluate and unpack categories that have also implied ranking of importance, such as the categories of high or fine art versus craft, ethnographic, anthropologic, self-taught, etc. This particular piece is adorned in leatherwork and beadwork, and this Carey series utilizes inspiration from functional objects. So a lot of times the ways that has been a lot of different approaches, but the ways that Native art has been othered historically has been by utilizing categorizations such as, this is craft, this is design, this is self-taught, this is, it's not academic, it's not fine art, it's not high art, it's something else, so it's shown in a separate gallery, it's taught in a different art history class, it is othered in other ways, and we're provided an imposed set of value systems. So these works are meant to push back against that and recognize the fact that those works have historically been embedded with deep knowledge, deep thought, intergenerational conversations, and they can offer a lot. So by creating works that are also functional, but taking practices and forms from within Native practices and putting them in museum and gallery spaces, and then thinking about, what is their function when they're outside of cultural use but inside of museum and gallery spaces. What do we as Native artists bring with us, and what do we choose to leave out and save for cultural participation spaces? And then the works are really meant to ask us to think about, what do we choose, what will we choose to exalt, what do we choose to carry forward with us in regards to our own value systems within the arts and outside of the arts, and how value systems, we get to choose what those value systems are. When we choose to exalt certain gifts from the land higher than others, we create imbalance. So if we're choosing to exalt oil as a deeper value than water, we inflict terrible imbalance and pain and violence on communities and on the land. This piece is titled Visiting. It's a 10-foot sculpture also covered in beadwork. And this piece was shown last year at the Armory and is meant to pay tribute to two artists that have been really important within the contemporary Native art field. This is just a couple details of the beadwork that's on this piece. And an installation view. I made this work in honor of my friend Jim Denemy, who passed 4 years ago, who is an Ojibwe painter who also lived in the Twin Cities, and this is his work on the left. And he made his work in honor of George Morrison, who is also an Ojibwe artist from Minnesota, who passed in, I think, 2019. I could be wrong on that, but also a profound contributor to the history of contemporary Native art and to modernism and to abstraction. And so I made a work in honor of two of my heroes and two of the people that have been really important in contemporary Native art and in my style. And all of the beadwork that is on this work was created by people that work in my studio. And my studio consists predominantly of my family, my mother-in-law, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, my daughter, my niece, my sister-in-law's cousin, one of my dearest friends, nephew and niece all work in the studio. And then we have a couple people that are from the Twin Cities arts community as well. And all of those people's histories and all of those people's upbringing and everything that they bring to this studio also is a form of visiting, a form of interaction. And so all I see, the combination of all of that beadwork on that piece I see the piece as a generational visitation between the artists, and the way that the work is produced is in visitation with one another in the studio, and then I see it as in visitation on the form itself. And then the last piece that I'll share with you is an installation at the Whitney Museum in New York, and it's on the 8th floor in the studio bar. Should you find yourself in New York, it's a permanent installation, so unless they choose to tear down the wall, you should be able to visit it. And this piece is titled Nourish. And I was really, really excited to get the opportunity to make this work, to make, a work that is a permanent installation. A lot of my work has been focused not only within my own practice, but in the ways that I have done curatorial work in the past and artist advisory work. I taught for just one semester, but I work really hard to be a support system within my community as well for other artists. I think it's extremely important to. I'm advocating strongly that people within the field see, recognize, and honor Indigenous arts not only as foundational, important contributions to U.S. art history, but also simply because I truly, truly believe that when we get to know each other's stories, when we understand one another, that's the place that we are best equipped to practice compassion for one another. And the only way we can do that is if we have visibility. And Native artists simply haven't been included in the canon, and it's starting to change, but that's in its infancy. So to be able to make a piece that's on permanent view at the Whitney was a profound experience for me, and something that very few Native artists have had the opportunity to do. So making sure that that work leads with strong representation of the history of Lakota aesthetics, the history of Indigenous aesthetics, the history of this place and this space, and making sure that that's unforgettable and included in a space such as the Whitney Museum of American Art was very important to me. But it's also important to me that the work nourishes everybody that stands in that space. So as Native people have not been able to walk into mainstream museum spaces and really see themselves celebrated and honored on a regular basis, it's important to me that they get to walk into that space and feel that immediately. But I also want this to be a place that nourishes every soul that walks into this space. So I thought a lot about what it takes to walk through a museum like the Whitney. And it can be exhausting, and it can be draining, and depending on what's on view, it can be really emotionally taxing. You're taking in so much aesthetically, and then you're taking in so much emotionally, and you're taking in so much intellectually. And so you step away, you take a break at the studio bar, and hopefully you get a drink, or you get a bite, or you sit with somebody, and you build actively work on a relationship with somebody in communication while you're visiting with them. And so my goal for this work was that this work also serves to nourish you while you're in this space. I wanted it to be an aesthetic palate cleanser, and a calming and meditative experience. So this is all done in ceramic tile, in collaboration with a female artist-owned company in Minneapolis called Mercury Mosaics. And I'll leave it there.